Join us every Wednesday for InFocus, a weekly talk show produced by the St. Kitts Nevis Information Service, where we provide exclusives with key persons within the government and discuss pertinent, relevant, and interesting matters that affect us all. Tune in every Wednesday, live on ZIZ Radio and streamed live on Facebook at SKNIS Media and ZIZ Online. InFocus, your government, your business.
I'm Ian Richards. Welcome to InFocus, a weekly program where we zoom in on what's happening within and throughout the government, your government. The Ministry of Sustainable Development and the Ministry of Environment, Climate Action and Constituency Empowerment, led by the Honourable Dr. Joyelle Clarke, are collaborating in what they are calling an intra-ministerial month of sustainability throughout the month of November. Over the past year, we've been hearing a lot about sustainability, the Sustainable Island State Agenda, and Sustainable Development Goals. But what does it all mean? Joining us today to share insight on these questions are Derionne Edmeade, Director of Environment and Director of the Urban Development Unit, Rhon Boddie. The Honourable Joyelle Clarke is unavoidably delayed and will be with us shortly. Stay with us as we delve into your government, your business. Welcome back to InFocus, and allow me to welcome now Mr. Derionne Edmeade, as we mentioned, from the Department of Environment, and Mr. Rhon Boddie from the Urban Development Unit. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thanks, and good afternoon. Yeah.
Mr. Edmeade, let's start with you, because as we established at the top, we've been hearing a lot about sustainability and the sustainable island state. What exactly does it mean, and why should we as a people care when you're talking about sustainability and transforming into a sustainable island state?
Okay, thank you, Ian. And let me first say that when we think about sustainability, we're talking about a country's ability to maintain or to support something over a period of time. It's the ability to exist and develop without depleting, for example, our natural resources. And for us here in St. Kitts and Nevis, it's a sustainable island state would mean producing our own food in terms of our dependency on the outside world. We're talking about renewable energy. It's just centered around the 17 SDGs that you would have known from the Sustainable Development Goals in terms of what we can do from a country's perspective in order for us to be, not using the word sustainable, for us to maintain or to even improve on our country's dependency on especially imports and exports, and ensuring that our people are prepared for the future generations.
Mm-hmm. So that's in terms of breaking it down to the ordinary person now, in terms of why should they care? That's the question, because I recall during one of the budget consultations recently, and somebody mentioned the word sustainable, someone in the audience said, I keep hearing that word, but I don't understand why I should care about it.
You see, if I can speak from an environment standpoint, if I'm permitted to do that, when we think about environmental sustainability, it is important for us to know that we have to preserve our resources. We have to preserve our things like clean air, water, our wildlife for future generations. So some may ask, so what are we sustaining? Why is it important to sustain? We have to understand that if you look at a fisherman, if you keep going and removing your resources or depleting the resources from a particular area, over time what will happen is that you will not have that particular resource anymore. We can look at our animals, our plants. If you continue to remove from a particular area without allowing that particular space to replenish, again, it means then over time that particular resource will be depleted. So many may ask, we continuously speak about a sustainable, and we talk about sustaining and sustaining and sustaining. But the message behind the idea of being sustainable is to ensure that, let's say, in the event of a disaster, for example, we must be able to sustain or to live on with what we have, because we would have been protecting such resources.
And Mr. Boddie, how does the Urban Development Co-op unit play into that?
Thanks for the question, but whilst I'm the Director of Urban Development, I'm here representing the Ministry of Sustainable Development. But urban development, as a department, what we are pushing for is resilience, right? Sustainability and resilience. We look at things like urban housing. We recognize that within the urban areas, and I want to clarify, for urban in St. Kitts, urban is relative, but for St. Kitts, our urban areas are Bastia, Greater Bastia area, which includes St. Peter's, Camp, down to Camps, that kind of area. And the Bastia Central, it includes the Greater Sandy Point area, Sandy Point, Fictula Valley, and the Greater Keon area. The delineation for the Keon area hasn't been set as yet, but yeah, those are the areas that we concentrate on. And as I was about to say, urban development it cuts across all sectors, right? So when we're talking about sustainability, we look at water, as Mr. Edmeade would have mentioned before. We recognize that in St. Kitts we have water scarcity right now, water shortages. And within, let's say, Bastia, let's concentrate on Bastia. When we look at the population of Bastia and the population that comes to Bastia on a daily basis, you realize the strain on water is exemplified, right? So we are looking at areas where how can we protect the resources we have right now, and how can we increase production? How can we make this sustainable, make it circular, so that we don't deplete our resource, but we find ways to replenish as we go along. We look at green energy, because back to the same thing, everybody, not everybody, but the majority of the population is in Bastia on a daily basis, yeah? So you know that all the power and everything, all the energy is concentrated within the Bastia area. So how can we sustain a power grid within the Bastia area that does not put a strain on the environment? So we are involved as well with the green energy, looking for renewable energy solutions for to deal with the energy situation, which would increase, which would get, we would, as we grow, we're gonna get more and more like that. We're looking at housing, you know, in the urban areas. We have a lot of, especially in Newtown and McKnight areas, there are a lot of, I want to be diplomatically correct, degraded areas with poor housing, and also, when I say poor housing, I mean that housing in a sense that if there's a major calamity, a major disaster, could be wiped out in an instant. So we're looking at housing solutions that are not only just to give a man a house, but resilient housing, sustainable housing that can, when we are looking to build now, and we collaborating with NHC, you're looking to build with water storage. You're looking to build with possibly solar panels, you know, so that things can go on.
So the house essentially can be self-sustaining itself. It's not necessarily relying on the power grid, not necessarily relying on the water supply, that persons are essentially able to help them themselves in the household, essentially.
Correct. Yes.
Right. And so,
Go ahead.
But I was going to ask in terms of, I suppose all of that works into the Sustainable Island State agenda. So
yes.
To your mind, what does the Sustainable Islands of St. Kitts and Nevis look like?
Well, first of all, when you think about a sustainable island state for St. Kitts and Nevis, we have to first ensure that, in fact, not we have to ensure, it's focused mainly on the SDGs. What are the SDGs? And some of the things that we we can look at as it relates to the SDGs is one that speaks to clean water and sanitation. So what we are saying is that we have to teach our people to avoid, wasting water. So we want to move in a state or community or environment where people understand that life on land is important, which involves planting trees to help to protect the environment. So as Mr. Boddie would have spoke to, the development of whether it's Greater Bastille or even the development of other areas within the country. While development is important, moving to a sustainable island state would help people to also understand that while you clear a particular area from trees, we have to also ensure that we are also doing the replanting aspects as well, because all of these will contribute to a sustainable island state. Another example, we want to be sustainable. We know the negative impacts that plastic, for example, would have on our environment. So being a sustainable island state means putting measures in place that will forces us or that will encourage us to move away from the single-use plastics. This is why the Department of Environment has taken up that mandate, and we are moving towards that agenda to a sustainable island state. It also speaks to our responsible consumption and production in terms of recycling, a project that the department is already doing. Such as whether it's paper, plastic, or whatever. All of these would contribute to a sustainable, or what a sustainable island state is supposed to look like. We speak of energy. Mr. Boddie alluded to that as well. A sustainable island state will see St. Kitts and Nevis being a green, or what we'll call green energy, whether it's solar panels. We have to, using less of our dependency on the fossil fuels. All of this would contribute to the sustainable island state agenda. So it may sound big when we say sustainable island state agenda, but to be honest, a lot of us are already doing the little things that is already contributing to a sustainable island state.
And so the department or should I say the ministry, has created the month of sustainability. It's taken a different approach to sort of highlight these things. Talk to us a bit about not just the activities per se, because we're going to get into that a bit later, but the importance of having a month of sustainability. Why was it important to have this month?
Well, from the minister's perspective, she understood that with her two ministries, we say two ministries, Ministry of Sustainable Development, as along with the Ministry of Environment, Climate Action, and Constituency Empowerment. Now, we understand that based on the government's agenda, which is a sustainable island state, we should be the ministry or ministries that's leading or in the forefront in terms of getting the message out to the people. And who better to do it than a ministry that even has part of the name, Sustainable Development, and also the other Ministry of Environment that plays a key role in everything that's sustainable. And from that idea, all of us were brought together around the table to see what we can do to build or to spread awareness on on sustainability. I don't want to say too much because I know Mr. Boddie want to jump in as well. But I think you asked about the month in terms of, why November. I think you're asking why now also, or if that is what you asked. But for us, it was more about doing it now and not so much about the month. When the idea came, I know the minister wanted it to be done at this particular time along with the PSAs, and we just chose November in terms of, we're looking at where we have the most activities, different departments have different, and we just wanted to squeeze it into 2023.
well, a part of that as well, a part of the squeezing,
yes,
is it has to do with the reset that the Prime Minister would have announced during his independence speech, right? It's reset for a lot of things. Is reset for housing, is reset for energy, is reset for everything. And it has to do with resetting the focus of the ministries, not just sustainable development, environment, climate action, but the entire government system into focusing on the different aspects of what makes a sustainable island state, right? So it's a reset for us. So as Mr. Edmeade mentioned, we are the leaders in this sustainable development, right? So we are the leaders. So we want to jump forward so that we can be the ones. We are the focus, but for us, the public, other ministries, private sector can link with us so that as we move forward in the creation of this sustainable island state, they know how, let's step together, basically. So we step forward first, and then we pull everybody along with us.
So the creation of an intra-ministerial committee, talk to us a bit about that. And for those who may not understand, explain what it means to have an intra-ministerial term. What does it mean exactly? And talk to us about the formation of the committee and what it was formed to do.
The intra-ministerial committee, I think is longer than that, but I'll leave it at that. The intra-ministerial committee was the brainchild of our minister. Our minister, Dr. Joyelle Clarke, has a huge ministry, right? Ministry of Sustainable Development. Whilst it's not a lot of things added to it, there are 7 departments within that ministry. You have the lands and surveys, you have land sales, you have public sector investment, you have statistics, right? You also have physical planning, of urban development. So there are a lot of intricate departments, a lot of important departments within that particular ministry. And then you have the Ministry of Environment, Climate Action, and Constituency Empowerment, which includes the Department of Environment, the Climate Action Unit, and in Constituency Empowerment. And what the minister saw is that within her overarching ministry, she being the minister of all of this, there are some areas that we can interlink and work together on. So she brought all the players on the table, right? And we've only had two meetings so far, and we've seen the benefits of such. Because what we find in government a lot is that there are things happening here, there, and everywhere. There's no collaboration. So one ministry or one department might be doing something which is very similar to another ministry in a different ministry and a different department. So by linking us first, then now we can go out and see, okay, what other departments or ministries are doing that we can collaborate. You know, we have this body and we could all collaborate as well.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because it actually leads to something that Mr. Edmeade said, which I did intend to ask about in terms of the timing. Now, so the timing is not linked to any sort of international commemoration or anything.
No.
Right. So then Youth Month is in November. Tourism Month is in November. Energy Month also is in November. And so are there any sort of collaboration, any linkages with these departments to further the work of the department in getting the word out about sustainability?
Yes, so I can speak to, from the ministry standpoint, I think Mr. Boddie can speak to what they're doing as well. So in terms of that collaboration, one of the things that we would have done is to develop our calendar around all the other celebrations that are happening within the month. So the calendar that we have was color-coded. For example, you will see all the youth activities, those that represent energy, and everybody else who tourism. And we see what we can do to collaborate with their activities. One of the things that we, from the ministry, is doing, for example, is to see, for example, we have the UN, who will be having their cleanup, let's say this weekend, which we use that as an activity for sustainability, because that is contributing to 1, 2, or 3 of our SDGs. Every ministry, every department, whatever work they do, it's contributing to some form of SDG. So whether it is our activity or another ministry's activity, we consider that to be a part of Sustainability Month, whether or not we're the one organizing it.
Oh, yes. Mr. Edmeade, you covered it perfectly. We do collaborate with all the different departments, all the different ministries, because, as I said, we are cross-sectoral. Ministry of Environment is across the board.
Yes.
Ministry of Sustainable Development is across the board. So we do collaborate. And yes, we made our month of activities. Whilst it's in November and it's a busy month for a lot of people, we did look at areas where we can collaborate with. For instance, we are collaborating with Energy on the Energy Fair on the 17th.
We'll get more into the activities later.
But yeah, that's part of the collaboration, and yeah, we have to. Being the kind of ministries that we are, we have to collaborate.
So it's the government essentially moving in one direction.
Yes.
So the intra-ministerial committee has an interministerial approach.
Yes,
right.
Correct.
Okay, so we'll talk a bit more about that. We're going to take a quick break, and actually what the persons who are viewing online or on ZIZ TV as we are live here, they'll be able to get a sense of how the youth department is involved a bit during the break. So we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with InFocus. Welcome back to InFocus. We continue our conversation with Derionne Edmeade, the Director of the Department of Environment, and Rhon, Boddie, who is the Director of the Urban Development Unit. And we're speaking about sustainable development. So, as we mentioned, there is a week of activities, a month of activities. It's the month of sustainability that has been introduced here in St. Kitts and Nevis for the first time. Now, tell us about the theme. The theme is building momentum towards sustainability.
That's for me. Yeah. Well, I think it's self-explanatory. As I mentioned before, we wanted to do this now as part of the reset. So we are starting the momentum going towards our agenda of becoming a sustainable island state. The month of activities is mostly focused on the ministries itself, training, public awareness, and stuff like that. We are getting ourselves ready because we recognize that 2024 is going to be a very important year in mobilizing this agenda, which we call the Sustainable Island State Agenda.
Okay. So we look at activities that have been planned for the month, and I'm not going to mention all of them, of course. So, but Mr. Edmeade, perhaps you can join in as well in terms of you said that there's some sort of a color coding that has been done. Perhaps you could explain to us how that works.
So with this particular one, this calendar highlights only the Ministry of Sustainable Development and the Department of Environment Activities. There was another one that would have color coded. That one would have included all of the energy, the energy, if the energy is having activity, youth, tourism, and from there we planned our activities to see how can we coordinate with on some of these activities. For example, if this was a color-coded one, you would have seen maybe it would have been in blue. That speaks to tourism in terms of who will be having their InFocus coming up this weekend. We plan to have a team who will be working with them. We had one for the UN. We have planned to have a team that will be working with them. The youth department is supposed to have a cleanup as well. We plan to work with them. So the calendar, when we look at it, it had the key that tells you what the activities in the month are, and it would tell you which color represent which department or which ministry, so we know how we can collaborate with that department or ministry to see how we can even continue to share our sustainable development goals and how they too can continue to push their activity in their month to ensure that all the departments or ministries are pushing the sustainable island state agenda.
Okay, so let me jump in here with some of the activities that are relative to the Department of Environment and also the Urban Development Unit, Sustainable Development, right? So, Mr. Boddie, I see here on the 13th, excuse me, that's Monday the 13th, there's a submission of an Urban Revitalization Development Plan for Cabinet approval. What's this plan? What does it entail?
It's actually the Urban Resilient Development Plan. Urban Resilience Development Plan. This plan was created back in 2022. We brought in a consultant to look at the space of Greater Bastille and come up with, along with the collaboration with the entire country, actually. We had consultations with everyone. How can we make Bastille resilient? How should we look at the development of the Bastille area and come up with a number of projects that would lead to making this, our beautiful Bastille, a resilient and sustainable space, right? So the plan focuses on protection, on access and mobility, partnerships. It focuses on different key areas, and beautifully enough, it leads right into what we are here talking about: sustainable island state. Everything that would come out of that is ideas, projects, programs that feeds into the same sustainable island state agenda. So on Monday the 13th, the department would be presenting this plan to Cabinet for approval. The plan entails a number of projects, some 40 plus projects, that some are short-term, medium-term, long-term projects that would enhance the Greater Bastille area once completed. Right?
No, the plan is going to Cabinet, and we understand the importance of the fact that it's not it's just a draft, essentially. Cabinet has to approve it. But I know a concern of governments over the years, and of the public as well too, and especially the security forces, has been houses that are abandoned.
Yes.
Are there any
within my department especially, that's one of our key roles, trying to put a positive use to abandoned properties. The difficulty has been, over the last few years I've been working on it, is getting ownership of these properties. Where in the first instance, we are not looking for ownership, we're looking for partnership. For instance, you have an abandoned property that we see we can develop into something positive. We might go to the owner and tell them, look, we could lease us the property, and we do what we're going to be doing, and after a certain amount of time it could be returned to you. But I know as well that the Ministry of Justice, the AG's office, is collaborating with urban development. We are looking into some legislation on how we deal with abandoned properties, basically. And because we have found that there are a lot of properties, especially around Bastille, where there's a difficulty getting to owners and stuff like that. But from another perspective, they're health hazard. They are security hazards. We find people hide stuff in there, whether it's guns, drugs, whatever. Also, people hide in there and attack persons, right, passers by and stuff like that. So the AG's office is looking into legislation, how we're going to deal with that legally, right? And so that is an important aspect of the plan that we spoke of earlier.
Okay. Yeah. Mr. Edmeade, I know that the department has been big on encouraging recycling.
Yes.
There has been an initiative to take it to the schools, to get young children involved so that they can take that home and, grow up with that practice, and also encourage their parents, their siblings, older persons to get involved in recycling. And I recognize that there is a prize-giving ceremony, a way to tangibly give back to these young persons who have been doing that. That takes place on the 9th.
Yes, so let me just inform you that the project, the campaign in terms of the competition would have started, a few weeks back. It went for about maybe 2 or 3 weeks, where with the recycling initiative that we would have started early last year, encouraging persons to, reuse, recycle. We took this to the schools after the program would have been doing so successful in terms of getting the general public to bring their recyclables to our collection points. We decided, let's take this to the schools, because the children are best to carry that message. And to be honest, it was an overwhelming response. So from the schools, must congratulate all the schools who participated, and can't forget the Ministry of Education who allowed them to participate in the exercise. And because of that, we have even more schools reaching out to the department, trying to get recyclable bins placed in their school, because that is one part of the project that we had, where we gave schools who wanted to participate in recycling bins that they can collect the recyclables. Once the bins are filled, we even encourage them to put them in plastic bags also, that we can collect them, because you don't want to tell a school they're collecting too much. We need as much as possible out of the environment. So we had almost all of the schools in St. Kitts and Nevis, majority of them participating, and this was only, primary elementary schools participating. And once that activity has come to completion, maybe a week or 2 ago, the ceremony will be tomorrow, Thursday, where we'll showcase in terms of the numbers, how much was collected, the weight, the school that collected the most bottles and so forth. Prizes will be given to the participatory schools, and the top 3 schools, so for example, who would have made the biggest contribution in terms of providing the bottles. I mean, we want to get to a point though where, if we ever have this exercise again in the future, that the quantity will be so small that there'll be no use for recycling, because it means that we have already been moving towards that sustainable island state agenda, where our dependency on the plastic bottles have become so small that we wouldn't even need to do that much collection, because the schools are no longer bringing that. And that is part of our awareness and the launch of our little character to really speak towards how they can even be sustainable within the schools.
And this final activity that I would like to focus on a bit, as we mentioned about the collaboration with other ministries in the government, would be an energy fair. The Ministry of Energy is having a fair, and the department is taking part. Mr. Boddie?
Yes, the Ministry of Public Infrastructure, Energy Unit, that is, in that ministry, is having a fair on the 17th, Friday the 17th. The Ministry of Environment and Climate Action is expected to have a booth there that they would be displaying the works of that ministry, and possibly projects that are online to come forward. Most times when we are invited to these things, they ask that we focus on, like for instance, it's energy fair, so we focus on projects that we have related to energy. But I don't know if that is going to be the case this year. Also, the Ministry of Sustainable Development would have a booth, and the different departments would be displaying what we are about. There was a session in the square last Friday, and the Ministry of Sustainable Development did participate in that. That was, I think, National Bank put forward. And what we set up, what we did there is that we had land applications and stuff like that there, so persons could have come and fill out forms and so on. That would be something similar that we do at the Energy Fair on the 17th.
Okay. So
Yes, if I could jump in here, I don't want to leave without mentioning one of the featured part of our launch of our Sustainability Month is a superhero we are now calling Captain SDG. You know, this superhero represents everything that's good for the environment and for St. Kitts and Nevis. So far, we would have had visitation at 3 primary schools. We have been to the Dr. William Connor. We were at Edgar Timoris this morning, where we launched Captain SDG, whole full suit, everything, whole character. Because this is the vision that we want, not just the little ones, people as a whole, to see when we think about protecting the environment. You know, we would have heard about Captain Planet, you heard about the Superman and the Batman. Mm-hmm. Well, we have our own superhero right here.
Unique to St. Kitts and Nevis.
In the ministry. Yeah. And so far, he has been overwhelmingly received. Right? It's an exciting time for us. And it is a character that the ministry, not just the Department of Environment, we want to build on. Because it may be a situation where we might have to send Captain SDG to other fields, because it's not just about protecting the environment. The energy might have something. They might need the help of Captain SDG. You know, so it's the reason why SDG is so important is because it's not just for the Department of Environment. It's not a linear character. It can be spread across any ministry that would like to have Captain SDG pay a visit.
Mr. Edmeade, you really should have brought a picture of Captain SDG so that persons looking at this program can get a sense. But tell me, is he online? Is he online on Facebook, your other department?
Yes, we have pictures on our Facebook page.
And the activities as well, the calendar of activities, that's also online?
I am not sure if it's on my Facebook. It might be on the minister's. All right?
Right.
The minister definitely will post that.
Okay. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to take a quick break and get back into some of the more other events that will be taking place during the month. I know that COP is coming up, and we'll be looking forward to learn a bit more about that, and certainly we'll be happy to welcome at that time the minister responsible for the ministry, the Honorable Dr. Joyelle Clarke. So we'll take a quick break and we'll be right back with more in focus.
If you haven't done it as yet, please do it today. Subscribe to our YouTube page at SKNIS Media for regular updates, live coverage, and even more information on your government. While you're at it, like, share, and interact with our Facebook and Instagram pages at SKNIS Media and SKNIS Info. If you haven't done it as yet, please do it today. Subscribe to our YouTube page at SKNIS Media for regular updates, live coverage, and even more information on your government. While you're at it, like, share, and interact with our Facebook and Instagram pages at SKNIS Media and SKNIS Info.
Welcome back to In Focus. We continue our discussion on sustainability and the sustainable island state here in St. Kitts and Nevis. We are speaking to Derionne Edmeade, who is the Director of the Department of Environment, Rhon, Boddie, who is the Director of the Urban Development Unit, and also we're joined now by the Honorable Dr. Joyelle Clarke, Minister responsible for Sustainable Development, Climate Action and Environment, and the Constituency Empowerment. Minister, welcome to In Focus. So we've been having a very interesting discussion about getting the public and building the momentum, as is the theme towards sustainable development here in St. Kitts and Nevis. And Sustainability Month, it's the first time that we're having it, and we just spoke a bit about how important it is. But getting the public on board is very important. Tell us a bit about the public education campaign that the ministry is having. How are you getting persons on board?
Right, thank you for that question. And it's so critical because The idea around sustainability, which is long-term, really requires buy-in from the public, but from the younger generations. And as Director Edmeade said, the Captain SDG and his engagement with the public, with the primary schools, it's so important because we need the youngest generation in St. Kitts and Nevis to understand, appreciate, and completely buy into the idea of sustainability, sustainable island state, and environmental conservation. The department and the ministry as a whole has taken on this mandate of engaging with our students, of consulting with the public, and of ensuring that every stakeholder in St. Kitts and Nevis has a part to play and a say in how we transition to a sustainable island state. So the public education is critical to the success of our momentum towards sustainability.
And in terms of legislation now, of course, we would have mentioned that Mr. Boddie did in any case that there was some proposals, some plans that were going to cabinet. And with reference to the urban development plan, we discussed that. But also there's a national physical development plan. Tell us about that.
Right. So legislation is important for environmental change and environmental conservation and for sustainability. There are some things that we can say, this is good for the country, this is good for the environment, but there's always a need for supportive legislation. Or we cannot enforce, we cannot police, and we cannot change. And that's really the reason why the legislation is so critical. While we can expect humans to say, yes, I am not going to litter, the legislation is there to ensure that you don't do it. And although it's a punitive measure, it is critical. For example, yesterday, while we were at the press conference, in the monthly press conference, I was speaking about, partnership with the community, about ensuring that we keep the communities clean, our green spaces, and the upcoming Christmas cleanse. And immediately, a worker from Parks and Beaches shares a video of a resident who went to the AG spoke about it, to the dirt road behind Skellig and dumped garbage. Garbage collection in St. Kitts and Nevis is free. So one wonders, why would anyone waste their time driving to a dirt road somewhere to dump garbage when it's free? And this speaks to why legislation and punitive measures are so critical. If you choose not to take advantage of free garbage collection, but jump in your car, spend $10 gas to drive to an abandoned space, a remote space, to dump garbage, then you should have a $5,000 fine. And that's where the ministry is looking at its legislative amendment and the legislative amendment to support greater fines, not because we think people have money to give away, but if behavioral change does not happen in line with the needed protection, then clearly the law must enforce the behavioral change. And that's why consultations are important. We're talking to you. We want to know what you need, what you think, and we co-design the steps that are needed to change behavior, to put policies in place, and after that, we amend the legislation. Now, 3 critical pieces of legislation, as you mentioned: the NPDP, the National Physical Development Plan, which guides how we use our land resources and how we zone. The NCEMA, the director can speak a little bit to that. That legislation, that change is going through several consultative processes and steps to get to the point where we have legislation which supports environmental conservation, how we protect and use our guts, how we use our sand resources, whether or not we do sand mining, where we do it, when we ban it, climate action, as well as sustainable island state. So we put it on pause to ensure we have enough consultation from sustainable island state mandate to be incorporated in the NCEMA, that legislation. And of course, for urban development, our urban resilience plan dictates how St. Kitts and Nevis develop in our urban spaces. But for Boddie, Director Boddie, to have the mandate to say this should happen and to guide cabinet and government, he also needs legislation. And that's where the Attorney General Office has already reached out, correct me if I'm wrong, to the unit about the abandoned lots and the legislation that encourages or mandates petitions to clean up your lot, or for the government to step in and say, it's been 30 years of nothing, we're taking this over and we're using this space for the public good. Only legislation can do that. But before what some may feel like is the heavy hand of the law comes down on people about environmental conservation and sustainability practices, the education is critical, and the ministry is taking the time to do the consultation with the public so that we can get to a point where the legislation doesn't bother us, because we're not going to pay $5,000 in a fine because we are going to do the practices that are sustainable.
You mentioned $5,000 twice. Is that an actual figure?
No, it sounds like a good figure for me. And I'll tell you what happened. Yesterday, I met with colleagues from the U.S. Embassy, and I related the story. And I was told that, in some states, it was a reference from the US, that a fine could be between $200 US, $500 US, but in some critical states, like in New York, where the population is extreme and, traffic is problematic and so forth, the fines are $5,000 upwards. Nobody's going to waste time throwing down some garbage to pay $5,000. In St. Kitts, is it 350?
Yeah,
if you 350. If you throw garbage, the little wardens can give you a ticket, and then what? And it's the same problem we're having with enforcement, even with construction. But I'll let Boddie talk about that, the challenges that we have with people breaking codes that are designed for their protection. So we will talk to the public again, see what works best together. But the fines will have to push for better behavior.
Okay.
$5,000 and up.
Mr. Edmeade, quickly, because we're running out of time for the show, and I do want to get to the upcoming COP meeting that's taking place again in the United Arab Emirates. So talk to us a bit about NCEMA.
NCEMA?
Yes.
Okay, so NCEMA really speaks to how the Department of Environment is managed. The minister alluded to a number of things that is found in NCEMA as it relates to legislation. She alluded to, I'll just highlight the critical ones, the mining. It speaks to how, mining should be done, the freeze and so forth. NCEMA speaks to how the whole physical environment is supposed to be managed in terms of your protected areas and so forth. It technically highlights the mandate of the Department of Environment. So it can take a while to go through NCEMA, so I'm just highlighting these things. But the whole idea behind the NCEMA, the National Conservation Environment Management Act, is to ensure that everything that the department, or by let's say the ministry, has mandate over is captured within legislation. So as the minister said, that when we go to enforce our duties as environmental officers, that this act would have enough, let's just say, backbone in order to protect us and to enforce.
And speaking of backbone and legislation, Minister, there's been talk about single-use, a ban on single-use plastics. There's been talk and talk and talk. I think some persons are wondering, when is there going to be action?
Oh, that's an excellent question. Are you ready for the action? Because the action, the next step, and Director can speak about this, is actually banning the importation of certain plastic items. And that, again, is a discussion with our key stakeholders, the wholesalers and the importers, customs and the Ministry of Finance, because we understand that, and that's why we started with our No Plastic Bag Mondays, that the public has to get accustomed to not getting a plastic bag, and then they have to be accustomed to not being served food in styrofoam containers or eating with a plastic fork or drinking from a plastic straw. And then we must consider, a person's going to hoard these items while we implement the ban. When we've hoarded them and they're now not in use, there's no more, persons are shop owners and small bars and restaurants able to purchase the biodegradable material, which would be $10 more expensive than a styrofoam container, to be exact. And what's the implication of that ban and on import and the increasing cost on activities, and who is going to absorb it? Is it the government? Are we going to transfer that to the restaurants and they then transfer it to the patrons and customers? So a chicken and chips that would normally sell for $10 in a styrofoam container, then in the country might
At
then,
Uncle T's as well.
right, might then translate to $12.50. You don't know. I'm just using extreme numbers, but so that's why buying is so important, and consultation to ensure that the government can partner with the stakeholders, the restaurateurs, the shopkeepers, the bars, those who plan the parties, to ensure that there is not this outcry like, oh my God, you have made the cost of living so extreme just to protect the environment. But rather, we understand that protecting the environment serves us as human beings occupying this piece of rock, St. Kitts and Nevis, with an increased cost, but it is not extreme, it's sustainability. And I just want to reference one thing really quickly, and it's a documentary I saw. I think it was on Netflix one late night. Can't remember the country, but I know it's on the African continent and it's a coastal place. And it reminded me of what director spoke about just now with sand mining, that there are beaches, is it Madagascar? I don't know. But anyway, there are beaches that are disappearing and have transformed from sandy beaches to rocks and pebbles, because people are so poor, they just go and take sand by the buckets, and they have reached to the point where they literally go in the ocean and, mine the sand to construct homes, but at the cost of beach erosion, of flooding, and that's where we don't want to get. So mining has to be controlled, plastic use has to be controlled, abandoned lots have to be controlled, how we zone and use our countries, it has to be controlled.
In terms of the single-use plastic ban, next year possibly, is there a timeline?
The director will come back to InFocus later this year, early next year, and give all of the timelines for the ban on imports of each item, and that would be as a result of the continued consultation we're having with the key stakeholders.
Right, and so we have just a bit over 5 minutes left, Minister, so let's jump into COP28 that takes place in the United Arab Emirates. Now, following last year's participation of the delegation, of course, it was one that was very extensive in the sense that we had a pavilion for the first time.
Yes.
There was a youth representative as well that was included, and of course we had 3 high-level representatives, yourself, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Right Honourable Dr. Denzil Douglas, and also the Minister of Energy, the Honourable Congress Maynard, would have participated. Similar plans to have that type of high-level delegation represented again?
Yes, similar plans. As you know, St. Kitts and Nevis is one of a few Caribbean countries with a mission in the United Arab UAE. And COP this year, it's not just about how we lobby for the environment. It's about the meetings that happen to push for partnership. And some of these critical meetings can only be had by heads of state, the Prime Minister, and Ministers of Foreign Affairs. Some technical sessions can only be had by Ministers of Environment. And with a focus on energy, Ministers of Energy have to be there. And even AICA has been saying to the Minister of Agriculture, Ministers of Agriculture have to be there. What's really happening is a shift towards recognizing that climate action and climate change is not just about ministers of environment and technocrats in environment. There are more lobbyists for oil companies at COP, right, Mr. Edmeade?
Yes.
Than there are environmental activists, because it's a fight against fossil fuels versus renewable energy. It's a fight for gender and justice and young people and rich countries. It's a fight against small island developing states and big countries who are making millions off of fossil fuels. To end the fight, we have to collaborate. One minister cannot do all those consultations, nor can one minister really understand the complexities of what's required for climate finance in particular. And St. Kitts and Nevis was praised last year for having ministers of energy and climate sit in the same space and negotiate, because oftentimes we're at loggerheads. We don't see the same thing. But here in St. Kitts and Nevis, we have one vision for sustainability around climate resilience. And it is premised on the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and who is also the Minister of Economic Development and Investment, being able to sit in meetings and lobby with governments for St. Kitts and Nevis. It is also premised on the Prime Minister, and I'm very grateful and thankful that our Prime Minister is attending COP this year and making our national statement, because CARICOM is very adamant about the position that we're taking as it relates to accessing funds when you want to respond to loss and damage, and about SIDS in particular. So this year we're doing it, and I'm proud again to say that this could not be possible without the support and partnership of the Republic of China and Taiwan, who again is ensuring that we have a pavilion to have our side events, and that we have youth representative. We have young women, we have men, we have NEVLEC, we have SKNIS, we have St. Kitts and Nevis, we have regional partners, SICRI, going under the banner of St. Kitts and Nevis to lobby in our technical sessions for climate.
And so important for St. Kitts and Nevis, and not just St. Kitts and Nevis, but smaller and developing states around the world. As you just mentioned, the lobbyists outnumber the delegates. So certainly that's something that is very important to consider. And the funding for this travel, Minister, you mentioned at the press conference on Tuesday that it was not coming from the government purse per se.
No, so we have one of our delegates has been sponsored directly by UNFCCC. We have 4 other delegates youth from the youth angle. We have, and the president of COP, we have sponsorship for 3 of our delegates who are the technical negotiators for us from SKNIS, from the Ministry of Environment, and then we have the support of ROC to sponsor everyone else. Yes.
And Minister, in terms of having these meetings now, of course, at the level, the ministerial level, we know that there'll be implementation. But what about, as you spoke about, the youth representation? When they come back, how do they transfer the knowledge? How do they transfer the experience back to persons here in St. Kitts and Nevis who would have not had that opportunity to travel to the UAE and experience COP?
Right, that's an excellent question, and I could spend the next hour telling you about the work profile of our young people, and Mr. Edmeade can also tell you the delegate, for example, from Nevis, Claudia Walters, who is actually a recipient of one of our sustainability scholarships this year. And this was a direct outcome of her participation last year, recognizing that she can do so much more academic-wise in terms of sustainability and climate resilience. So congrats to her again. Spent the entire year not just working in the Ministry of Youth in Nevis on a green focus for her youth activities, has now worked regionally with Girls Care, part of her co-sponsor, and we have them again sponsoring us this year, Girls for Climate Justice, sponsoring our new youth female delegate from Nevis again. Spent the entire year with her work program with Remarkable Teens and with that regional Girls Care program on climate focus activity. So she learned from her experience at COP and then imparted throughout the year in her work program in the NIA, her work program with Remarkable Teens, and then her work program with the regional projects. So there is sharing, there is no gatekeeping. You learn, you share, and someone else gets an opportunity.
And the selection of the youth rep, how is that done?
That is also done with the youth rep. Once we are partnering with a regional agency, we reach out to that agency for their nomination. It must be a person from St. Kitts and Nevis, and we prioritize Nevis in this case. And the person must demonstrate everything that's needed from the regional organization's point of view in terms of climate justice, climate action, support in your NGO work, activism, advocacy, and then we take that nomination and we do our vetting and move forward. So it's very independent of, like, as a minister, I don't say this person and not that person. We get the recommendations from the regional agencies that we work with and their willingness to sponsor. For the other youth delegate, Mr. Ryan Phillip, who's at the Ministry of Water Department, he was also sponsored by the COP presidency, and that was also a rigorous application process to prove that you're doing real work in climate action and that you're going to share afterwards.
Minister, we would love to get to where St. Kitts and Nevis is at in terms of the SDGs, but we'll have to leave that for another time because we're out of time for today's program.
Yes.
And so I'd like to thank you, as well as Mr. Boddie, Director Boddie, and also Director Edmeade for joining us for this edition of InFocus. And we certainly look forward to welcoming you back and hearing a lot more about what is happening.
We'll be back after COP.
Right, and so we'd like to thank you, viewers and listeners, for joining us for this edition of InFocus. We trust that you'll join us next week at the same place at the same time. For now, I'm Ian Richards. So long.
Join us every Wednesday for InFocus, a weekly talk show produced by the St. Kitts Nevis Information Service, where we provide exclusives with key persons within the government and discuss pertinent, relevant, and interesting matters that affect us all. Tune in every Wednesday, live on ZIZ Radio and streamed live on Facebook at SKNIS Media and ZIZ Online. InFocus, your government, your business.